Welcome to our lesson on comparing unit fractions and fractions. The objectives for this lesson are first, to use fraction bars and number lines to compare fractions, which you're already familiar with fraction bars and number lines. And second, to use fraction circles to develop understanding of comparing fractions with the same denominator or with the same numerator. Let's just review for just a minute. A fraction is a number that names part of a whole or part of a set. We've talked enough about fractions that you should be familiar what a fraction is, but let's just look at what a unit fraction is. A fraction that the numerator is always going to be 1, and it shows one equal part of the whole. In this example, here it is 1/4 of the whole 4/4. Two of the tools that we'll be looking at again are two tools that we've already been working with in this last few lessons, the fraction bar and the number line. Both of them demonstrate, in this case, 1/6 of a whole. We're going to be talking about comparison of unit fractions, and here is a demonstration of some fraction bars. First, the top one demonstrates a 1 whole, 1 of 1, and then each bar below demonstrates a different group of fractions. We go to half, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, and 8ths. But what I want you to do is ask yourself 4 important questions. The first one is, what do the fraction bars on this page show? So look at those fractions and see what you see as you look through them. How is each fraction bar like the others? How is each fraction bar different from the others? And then lastly, what pattern do you notice in the fraction bars? So if you were to look at each one of these, we're going to take a minute and discuss this in class. So I want you to take a look at these and see if you can see a pattern. Now it asks you a very important question. It says, describe 2 patterns that you see in the fraction bar. I would like you to be able to identify some patterns and be able to describe them in class. So be prepared to look these over and see if you can understand the question. Let's review some important symbols for our lesson today. First of all, we have greater than, less than, and equal to. And each of these symbols are familiar to you. But I want you to understand one thing. When you hear the term greater than, it is always going to be describing a symbol that is directed in this way. This identifies the greater than. This will always describe the less than. The direction that it is pointing will describe less than. And this symbol will always be equal. The number line is one tool to compare unit fractions. So here is an example of a number line that we have had placed on there: 1/8, 1/6, 1/4, 1/3, and 1/2, all unit fractions. And the question it wants you to ask is, describe a pattern that you see in the number line. Is it similar to the pattern that was demonstrated in the fraction bars? Think about those 2 as you prepare for our lesson tomorrow. And I want you to look at these particular fractions. These are again fraction bars. And look at the 1/3 and look at the 1/11. What do you see? I could also add a fourth here. What is the pattern that we see happening here? If you understand, the larger the denominator, the number on the bottom, the smaller the unit fraction will be. The larger the smaller the denominator, the larger the fraction will be. For example, look at the half, and then let's take the eighth. We've got the eighth right here. I've demonstrated that half is, if you look at this without using any other judgment other than observation, this piece is larger than this piece. If we identify it, this is greater than the 1/8. It identifies that we are correct. Now let's look at the fractions on a number line. So we have a number line demonstrated here that is similar to the one that we observed earlier. We have 1/8, 1/6, 1/4, 1/3, 1/2. Now, the question that they want you to answer is 1/4 larger than 1/7 or smaller? Is it greater than or less than? Well, 1/7 would fit in this area right here, and here's our fourth. We know that as it gets, this is a larger piece than the 1/7, and our answer is correct. Now let's look at comparing fractions with different numerators and denominators. So first of all, let's look at this 7/8, and 5/8. If we were to compare these, the denominator is the same, 8, and both of them are divided into portions of 8. Here is our 7 pieces of 8, and here are 5 pieces of 8. It's pretty simple for us to identify that 7/8 is greater than 5/8. How can we use these fraction circles to demonstrate this problem and other problems? It's easy for us to lay them out and to identify the larger portions. We can compare them by laying them on top of each other if we wish to see which one is larger. Now we're going to help our puzzle penguin here. It indicates, today my teacher asked me to compare 3/7 and 3/9 and to explain my thinking. I wrote 3/7 is equal to 3/9. My thinking is that both fractions have 3 unit fractions, so they must be equal. Well, we know that there is a question whether they are correct. He is correct in his thinking, and I want you to think about this and be able to discuss it in class. Think about why he could be correct or why he could be incorrect. Now, in addition to fraction bars and number lines for comparison, you can use fraction circles. Here's 3 sets of fraction circles. This one is divided into quarters, into fourths. This one is divided into sixths, and this one is divided into eighths. You will have an opportunity to participate in an activity where these are used to identify fractions, unit fractions, and other fractions. We have a circle here and a circle here. I've identified 1/2 here and 1/3 here. It's pretty easy to visually identify which one looks larger, which one's greater than. I've identified it as 1/2 is greater than 1/3. Now let's compare using the less than, greater than, or equal sign. Now here we have a question, 5/6 and 5/3. Now I have demonstrated it with some fraction circles. Here is 5 parts, 5/6, and here we have 5/3. We have one whole and 2 parts of another. If we were to identify simply, we would say that 5/3 is greater than 5/6. Just by looking at it. Here is our activity that we'll be doing where we use our fraction circles. In addition to identifying unit fractions and fractions with different numerators and different denominators, we'll have the opportunity to compare different fractions to understand more fully how fractions work and how they are demonstrated. Now, the conclusion of this brief lesson, there are 2 parts that I want you to be able to identify. So if you need to review and look at this video again, you should be able to describe 2 methods you can use to compare unit fractions. And then you should be able to explain how you can compare fractions that have the same denominator and how you can compare fractions that have the same numerator. Good luck, and please be prepared to explain these 2 assessment questions tomorrow. Thank you, and have a good evening.